2023. Look at 2023. Same thing. End of the first round, beginning of the second this time. It kind of bled into the beginning of the second, but mainly the end of the first round. Other than that, I don't really see any trends between 2022 and 2023. The biggest point is that you can't really go wrong. We talked about this, touched on this a bit in the running back video, but you can't really go wrong with taking wide receiver at the end of the first round this year. Yes, I feel like at some point, water's going to find its level. I feel like at some point, the pendulum is going to have to swing back to the running back side, where the league winners, the biggest league winners, are going to be the running backs. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. I would just assume that will eventually happen, but that doesn't mean that any of these wide receivers going in this range in 2024 aren't going to be good values based on the historical data that we've seen, which is very proven over the last couple of years. And to me, in 2023, I really want to look at what went on here and kind of see some specific players that went in certain ranges beyond even the late first round and see if we can't find different team situations that kind of fit that build and could be potential league winners this year or advanced rate winners.
I agree. So let's break it all down, and let's start with that late first. This year, going in the late first, you've got Puka Nacua, you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Garrett Wilson, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., you've got Drake London. Those are the 5 guys. I'll be honest with you, I like my chances with almost every single one of those receivers, but especially if you're getting Puka Nacua from picks 9 to 12. I think he's the guy this year that's going to make the end of that round on next year's positional heat. I think he's going to be making it green. But I also like A.J. Brown. You know what you're getting with A.J. Brown. Drake London has that upside. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's a rookie, and what we've learned is drafting rookies in the first round of these drafts can be really risky. Really risky, but it's not to say that he doesn't have the talent to do it, nor the situation. It's just saying that you're drafting him to be the cornerstone of your team. But that being said, yes, individual players can have sway on these graphs, but acting like, and we had people act like this in the running back video, and it just is.
It's not true.
It's not true that one player was affecting the entire end of the first, into the second, like both years.
Yes, last year CeeDee Lamb majorly contributed to the success rate at the end of the first round because that's kind of the range where he was going. But so did A.J. Brown, and so did Amon-Ra St. Brown, also going in that range.
Yes, exactly.
Like Stephon Diggs.
And so did Diggs.
Stephon Diggs' fall off, again, didn't really happen until the latter half of the season. He was very, very productive for the first half of the season, which counts towards your playoff advance rate. A lot of people probably made the playoffs because of Stephon Diggs' first half of the season.
Yeah.
Like that is a fact. Garrett Wilson, disappointment. Devontae Adams did exactly what you expected. Drafted as a wide receiver 9, ended up being the wide receiver 10. He had a good beginning of the season, good end of the season, the middle not so good. Waddle sucked compared to expectations that you had for him. Olave also sucked. So really, the big ones that didn't hit here were Waddle, Olave, and Garrett Wilson.
All going like team 8 through team 3 in the second round, where you see it average out to White there. But again, even this is what that proves to you. Even in the second round, where you are picking wide receivers that don't necessarily pan out, it's far better than picking a running back that doesn't pan out. Picking a running back that doesn't pan out actually hurts you.
It will ruin you.
Picking a wide receiver that doesn't pan out, it pretty much just gives you an average chance of making the playoffs, an average chance of advancing in the playoffs. And so that's what you see here with wide receivers. I want to...
Generally, the upside of a running back that hits in later rounds is higher than the upside of a wide receiver that technically hits in later rounds.
And when you're defining a wide receiver bust, there's a lot higher floor for that than there is a running back bust. Yeah. A running back bust sucks. A wide receiver, like you're talking about Chris or even Jalen Waddle being a wide receiver bust, like being a wide receiver 2. You can still win even if you missed and he's still a wide receiver too. Like that's absolutely true. And so again, I want to highlight, I think Puka Nacua, I think A.J. Brown are 2 guys this year late in your fantasy drafts in the late first round that I want to be building my teams around, particularly Puka Nacua. Like I will be drafting and building around Puka Nacua in those late rounds as much as possible. I think the target insulation, the yak ability that he was able to show, the role he's able to have on that offense, not to mention is baked into his price tag. They think Cooper Kupp is going to affect him. He's a guy, Puka Nacua, that was 5th in fantasy points among non-quarterback players last year.
Yeah.
So I think that's how you apply that to this year. But let's move to kind of the late 4th, early 5th here.
Yeah, that was another hot spot that we saw in 2023. And in fairness to you guys, like this is definitely one of those ranges where it was impacted by one player drafted in that range, and that one player was Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk was a guy that in fantasy last year we weren't necessarily the highest on because there's a lot of competition there, but he ended up being very productive, ended up being a wide receiver 1 when he was out there and playing. And And I think the big point to know here is that opportunity and volume doesn't always mean fantasy production on bad offenses, because there were a ton of wide receivers going around this range that technically had more target opportunity than Brandon Ayuk, but ended up being way, way less productive. I'm thinking Deontay Johnson, case in point, in this range. And when you're looking at this year, who are some of the wide receivers going around there? George Pickens, who we've talked about in a positive light, in fairness, but not the best situation.
No,
Amari
not the best
Cooper, proven to be productive the last couple years in Cleveland's offense despite the quarterback situation. Christian Kirk no longer around Calvin Ridley, which is nice. Christian Kirk was going in this range last year as well with Calvin Ridley in that offense. Now he's gone.
Yeah.
Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, and Hollywood Brown. So I think those are some interesting wide receivers to kind of keep an eye on. I mean, if you see all those wide receivers that I just listed in 2024, which one do you think would be this year's Brandon Ayuk? Like, if you were to be a guessing.
Dang, that's a loaded question. You know,
It's Amari Cooper.
Waddles, no.
yeah, from a points perspective, yes, I could see it being Amari Cooper. Of those guys you listed, I probably would need to go up to pick mine. I think it could be Michael Pittman again, because he's going as the wide receiver 24 right now.
Yeah.
And he's going at the like middle of the third, end of the third actually. He's going into the third. You have guys like DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Devonta Smith, Malik Neighbors going there. I don't really think there's a clear-cut candidate. The main thing with Brandon Ayuk was he was the second wide receiver being drafted from that offense. And that was the only reason you were getting him that cheap. And so looking at guys like that, Jalen Waddle is going, but Jalen Waddle's still going end of the second. His ADP's 22. Like, so with that, like, I think he could be that guy, but he's overpriced to be that guy. So by default, he can't be. So whether somebody has that or not this year, I'm not sure. It's more the fact that targeting wide receiver twos in elite passing offenses always going to be better than shooting for volume and opportunity and targeting wide receiver ones in bad offenses.
Yeah.
So.
And who's your big exception here from last year? It's Adam Thielen, right? But Adam Thielen, his risk was so high, but his price was so low. He had so much volume and opportunity, but he was going, in the 9th round? Or was
Thielen,
it later, the
13th.
10th or 11th?
He was going like the 13th.
Seriously? Is
Yes.
that late?
Yes.
No way.
Yes, it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we couldn't stop taking him there at that price because the opportunity was there. There is always a price point where you want to take opportunity for sure. But when you're looking in these early rounds, like that's not when you want to be taking the shots. 8th round is another notable cold sore that we saw.
Interestingly enough, well, the 8th round actually in 2022 was a cold spot as well. The 9th and 10th were better in 2022, but they were bad in 2023. So this range is kind of, I don't think that you could say that there are any clear trends in the data here. It's just more speculation at this point. But last year in particular was pretty interesting.
Yeah, Sky Moore, Quentin Johnston, Elijah Moore, Treylon Burks, Kadarius Toney, and Michael Thomas. To me, what I see is a bunch of unproven wide receiver twos. I'd even include Michael Thomas at this point in his career because he's as unproven as any of them because he's so far removed from his hyper production. And then they really are all wide receiver twos. Like, some people did predict maybe Sky Moore would be the wide receiver one behind Travis Kelce. That's essentially a wide receiver two. And QJ, unproven rookie, very raw. Elijah Moore, never proven anything. Burks, never proven anything. We bought the hype there. Kadarius Toney, a lot of people loved his athletic upside there, never proven anything. It didn't matter what situation they were in, whether it was good, whether it was bad. It just didn't work out for any of these guys.
Yeah.
So
and guys this year that are fitting that mold almost to a T. Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston going in the same range here. Jameson Williams.
Jameson Williams
example.
is a huge one.
And Jameson Williams is a guy already. And some guys are just like this.
He's unproven, and there's a ridiculous amount of target competition as well. Like, even if Jameson Williams ends up being what Detroit wants him to be, that's still a deep threat.
And with Jameson Williams, he's a guy that is going to continually move up fantasy football ranks just because of Twitter hype, just because of training camp hype.
Yeah.
We've done this before, guys. J-Mo, Khalil Shakir. This is a volume thing. It's a good offense, but we know what Khalil Shakir is. Curtis Samuel, same thing. Same offense. We know what they are.
Guys, if you want to learn a lesson from the Kansas City Chiefs offense in 2023, look no further than the Buffalo Bills of 2024. They are going to look dang near the same. They're going to be run first. They're going to run a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to throw the ball to Dalton Kincaid.
and they're not necessarily going to have a top 15 to 18 producing wide receiver.
No, it generally what we found, and we did this in our wide receiver research, Stats Don't Lie video that was super cool, talking about some opportunity, and we found that talent always outweighs opportunity in an offense. So you're not going to see a guy who's you know what Shakir is. You're not going to see a guy like him end up being a high-end wide receiver too. From a fantasy perspective, you're more going to see like 50% of Josh Allen's passing attempts going to a bunch of fantasy irrelevant guys based off of the data that we see.
And the talent will rise to the top. And who's the most talented pass catcher in Buffalo?
Kincaid.
Easily. So for us, like, it's not like, okay, it has to be a wide receiver because there's vacated volume. It's like the most talented guy there. Kincaid is a big slot. He will be used as a big slot, and he's going to command a lot of targets, and he's going to be good in the red zone. People think that we're insane for how highly we think of Dalton Kincaid, in the fact that we said we'd take him as our tight end 3. He's tight end 5 on Underdog right now. He's tight end 5 or 6, 7 on ESPN Yahoo. So I don't think it's crazy. I mean, again, I'm avoiding these wide receivers that we know are unproven, that we know haven't done anything, and that are odds are they're not going to be that productive this year. And I'm going to take better shots. And honestly, like a lot of times with 8th round, 9th round, that becomes running backs. Because you can get cheaper running backs in this range that have enough of a split in their workload to where they're either getting some touchdowns, like David Montgomery is, or they're getting some receptions, like somebody like Aaron Jones is. And I think that's why you saw that range last year. And then the other thing that we saw pretty consistently in this data as we wrap up is the wide receivers pass round like 12. Every single wide receiver that hit big from there, almost every single one of them, with the exception of Rashid Shaheed and Adam Thielen, they were all rookies.
They were rookies.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
So if you're really going to take shots on wide receivers, pass round 13 or 14, you're taking shots on rookies. Last year, you're talking about guys, obviously guys like Puka Nacua, but guys like Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed are better examples of this, right? They're guys that you were able to consistently flex in fantasy football and guys you were getting super duper late. Ended up being waiver guys in a lot of like drafts where you're only drafting 12, 13 players. You're talking about, I'm trying to think, there was another rookie on there last year that I can't remember who it was. But this year, I mean, let's just talk about this year. Past like the 12th, 13th round this year. Xavier Legette.
Jaden Reed was going in that range too.
I said Jaden Reed.
Oh, you did? Okay. Cool.
And Jaden Reed.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. Jaden Reed.
Xavier Legette going really late this year, a guy that could step in and, it's not about volume there. It's about he could end up being the most talented pass catcher. Jalen Polk, Malachi Corley, Jermaine Burton, Javon Baker. All 5 of those guys are guys, rookies, that if you're going to take shots on wide receivers later in rounds, take shots on those rookies because historically it's really shown that it'll prove off. And again, most of the veterans you end up drafting there, most of them don't end up panning out. I think there are definitely safer picks, but when you're going for upside, especially in best ball, you're definitely going to be going for some rookies there.
Yeah,
especially ones that can get.
And all
roles
those
early.
guys that we mentioned too have, with the exception of Burton, a direct avenue to immediate production as well.
Yes.
And it kind of is, we're past the point in that range of drafting in fantasy where we're betting on our own evaluation of their talent and can they or can they not produce. We that's when we do care about opportunity.
Sure.
And I'll do you one better with taking rookies in the late rounds. I'll take it further and say I would pass up on the more expensive rookies going in the earlier rounds as well. We just saw this last year with JSN, with Quentin Johnson, with even Zay Flowers to an extent, like in his price. Addison, even though he outproduced expectations, like none of them were insane league winners or anything like that in fantasy because they were just being drafted too high. And I know the talent of this year's rookie class, especially at the wide receiver position, is very, very high. But look at their price. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. as a rookie wide receiver, not even a running back, a rookie wide receiver, incredible talent, going to a great situation, is being drafted as a wide receiver 9 at the tail end of the first, beginning of the second.
Marvin Harrison guy has Josh Allen.
Same range as A.J. Brown, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Brandon Ayuk, like Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, all of these guys. And Malik Neighbors going at the tail end of the second, beginning of the third on a horrible offense. I mean, we just talked about take elite players in really good offenses instead of players that you're not so sure about in their production and bad offenses. It's about the price in the early rounds especially. I'm not going to go out there and say that I think the guys in the later round like Legette, Polk, Corley, Burton, and Baker are going to outproduce Neighbors
bad
and
idea.
Odunze and Marvin
Right.
Harrison Jr. We're not in the business of doing that, and I honestly think it would be foolish and stupid for us to predict that. But if you're getting 75% of the points in the 12th or 13th round that Neighbors and Harrison are going to get you in the second round,
Yeah.
heck, 50% of the points, you're getting more of a win and probably more of a chance of getting close to the playoffs and maybe even winning your league if you invest in those players at a cheaper price in the later round.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And so again, just like with the running back video, you can take anything you want from this. You cannot take anything you want. I don't think you can say that the data here's it's objective. Like, this is factual truth that happened. Like, I don't understand how people get so upset about it. But if you play fantasy football, make sure you subscribe for us. That really helps us out. Make sure you drop a like on the video. Those two things, they take you 5 seconds to scroll down. 1, 2. Those two things help Nathan and I out so much, and it's going to help us build this channel. We'd really love if you did those two things for us. We appreciate you guys watching today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later. Here are 6 wide receivers that we really, really like in fantasy football right now. Drake London is going to be the first one here. With Drake London, this is a guy that you haven't necessarily seen prove that he can produce at a wide receiver 1 level and is being drafted at a wide receiver 1 price. He's currently the wide receiver 10 on Underdog Fantasy Football. So a lot of people are going to look at that with Drake London and say, that's a big red flag, and for that reason, I'm going to be avoiding Drake London. And I honestly can't describe to you how bad of a situation Drake London has been in the last 2 years. And yes, he's averaged 10.5 and 11 points per game in the last 2 years, which doesn't amount to hardly anything besides barely being flexible in fantasy football. And we totally acknowledge that. But with that being said, this is a guy that had 109 targets last year in an offense where they threw the ball as little as almost any team in the NFL. This is a guy who had Desmond Ridder throwing him the ball last year.
This is a guy who had Arthur Smith as his head coach.
This is a guy who was 36th in the league in catchable target rate. This is a guy who had 2 touchdowns last year total, because when you're looking at what he was able to do in the red zone, 22nd in red zone targets. This is a guy, it's a 6'4" wide receiver that was 22nd in the league in red zone targets. This is a guy that has Kirk Cousins coming to that offense, fresh new deal and fresh new pissed off attitude because they drafted another quarterback like right away. But Kirk Cousins coming off of an Achilles, there are plenty of questions there as well. But assuming that Kirk Cousins is ready for the season, which all reports are that he should be, Kirk Cousins is not only an upgrade, it's kind of the polar opposite of what you've seen from a quarterback standpoint in Atlanta for the last couple of years, because the last couple of years, you're talking about, from a fantasy perspective, the worst of the worst. I mean, let's even look. Like, because I get why people are scared to take Drake London this high with the lack of proven production, and I get it. But, like, Desmond Ridder last year, he attempted 388 passes. He had 2,800 yards, completion percentage 64%, 7.3 yards per passing attempt. 7.3. 7 yards. I mean, oh my gosh, let's look at his efficiency. He was 35th in the league in accuracy rating. Do the math. There are 32 teams in the NFL, right? He was 25th in true completion percentage, right? He was 24th in clean pocket completion percentage. He was 29th in true passer rating. He was 25th in QBR. He was 31st in EPA. He was just not good. I don't think anybody would argue that, but again, like, it's how much was that playing into Drake London's production last year and lack thereof, and in my opinion, in Nathan's opinion, a lot. A significant amount. Now you bring in a quarterback that can support a wide receiver 1. We've seen him support a wide receiver 1 and a tight end 1, right? And so you've got him and you've got Kyle Pitts, but Drake London is the clear alpha wide receiver in that offense. They didn't bring in a ton. There was definitely a world where the Falcons drafted another wide receiver. It would have been stupid, but there was, I mean, as stupid as drafting a quarterback, who knows? But I know people are going to hate on me for that, but I just, there was a world where Drake London has more competition than Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts can be productive. Drake London can be productive in fantasy football, and Kirk Cousins can support them both. Drake London as a talent and as a route runner in his first couple of years, he's been efficient with the limited volume that he has, and his route running statistics are very good and very promising. Everything is set up for Drake London to break out this year. We're going to bet on that, and I honestly, if you have anything to support that, feel free, but...
Yeah, I have a fun fact for you guys.
All right, cool.
So Kirk Cousins, last year in the Vikings offense, the 8 weeks that he was healthy, he threw the ball 44, 44, 50, 19, 47, 31, 45, and 31 times. So that sounds like a lot of volume. You're like, okay, yeah, that's a lot. What production for the receiving assets in that offense did that actually turn out to be? Because if we're being honest, the receiving assets that he had last year were more talented than he has this year. Really, this year it's just Drake London and Kyle Pitts.
Sure.
There are some guys after that, even Bijan Robinson, who's a good receiving threat as well in the backfield, but that's kind of a different
Jefferson and Hawk
type of threat.
They clear those guys.
Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Addison. Addison is a fresh rookie. A fresh rookie was able to average when he was healthy. When these guys were all three on the field together, Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Addison. So that was the first 5 weeks of the season.
Yep.
J-Jeff had 22 points per game. Hawkinson had 16.5 points per game, and Addison had 15.5 points per game.
You're also bringing in an offensive coordinator that has played under or has called plays under Sean McVay, right? So you're coming from the Shanahan coaching tree, right?
Well, and he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was quarterbacks coach too, and he was one of the ones that would draw up the plays specifically in the passing game as well.
Yes.
He was like a pass game.
And so you're not only betting on Kirk Cousins, you're betting on Zach Robinson as well. So with that, I'm willing to make that bet this year. I think Drake London has all the upside in the world.
That's a lot of points per game to go around.
And even if you're like neutral on Drake London, I think avoiding him is just you're playing a very risky game of missing somebody who could really be like a top 6 wide receiver in fantasy.
Should be nervous for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next guy we're going to have here is Calvin Ridley. We talked about him.
Yeah.
We can't stop talking about him, and we're not going to stop because honestly, this is a guy who last year, after not playing football for 2 years, remember this, he did not play football for 2 years. Don't forget that the expectations for Calvin Ridley last year were top 15 wide receiver expectations after not playing football for 2 years. So he goes out and puts up 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, 136 targets for 76 receptions, and we're disappointed. We're disappointed? Why were we disappointed from that? It was because the price, again, was too high to begin with. But how did he lose value this year? Honestly, like, I understand there's questions with Will Levis. I understand there's questions with the Titans as a whole. And you'd probably prefer Trevor Lawrence to be throwing the ball to him than Will Levis. I understand that. But from a volume and production perspective, I don't think there's that much of a gap between Lawrence and Levis when it comes to like providing volume for the wide receivers to produce, especially not shots downfield. Levis ain't afraid to take shots downfield. That was something that Lawrence actually struggled with last year. I'm looking at Calvin Ridley getting pretty much the same amount of targets that he did last year.
Yes.
And probably turning more of them into receptions.
Yes. I agree with that. I mean, and here's the other thing. The perception around the Tennessee Titans is that, like, okay, the Tennessee Titans are bad for fantasy. You got Mike Vrabel, you got Derrick Henry, and you got...
That's done.
Wait.
It's a clean slate.
You've got... Who's their head coach?
Callahan. Bill Callahan, coming from the Cincinnati Bengals. Oh, yeah, sorry, Bill Callahan is his dad, who's the O-line coach now for the Titans. Brian Callahan is coming from Cincinnati, and he's known for changing that offense mid-season a couple years ago when they were really struggling and like turning over the playbook overnight pretty much.
Yeah.
And they built the system that was a lot more friendly for Joe Burrow's capabilities and what he's so good at and what that offense was so good at. And that was centered around the passing game and doing a lot of things in shotgun, which is going to really incentivize you to pass the ball a lot more and give the ball to your weapons like Calvin. Like they spent a lot of they put a lot of investment in the wide receiver position specifically this offseason to help Will Levis develop. Like don't expect we like Tony Pollard a lot in his value right now, and we think he's going to be pretty productive given his respective price in fantasy. We think Tyjae Spears has an avenue to be productive as well. But if I'm betting on anyone on that offense, it's going to be the receiver first because of how Callahan has developed an offensive scheme around Joe Burrow and those assets. Again, is it going to look like that exactly? Is it going to be just as productive as the Bengals? No, because the talent is not even close to what Cincinnati has in Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. But it'll be a diet version of that. And at Calvin Ridley's price in fantasy right now, it's going to be worth taking him.
All right, let's talk about George Pickens now. And George Pickens, fun fact, last year he was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football in 4 games, and that's great. The problem with George Pickens is that George Pickens finished as the wide receiver 45 or lower 10 games last year. He is not only like hit and miss, he's like hit and miss and then hit again. So with George Pickens, there's a lot of questions. However, when you're looking at George Pickens and where he's being drafted in fantasy football right now, and you're looking at the context behind what his situation has been in the last couple of years, he's the wide receiver 28. He is the wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh. In my opinion, them taking away Deontay Johnson was a big deal. And
it is a big deal.
While I want to give props to Roman Wilson as somebody that I liked very early in the draft process,
he is not Deontay Johnson.
Not even anywhere in the stratosphere of Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson has been top 10 in targets in targets over the last 2 years or 3 years in the NFL or something like that. Deontay Johnson's top 10.
And objectively one of the best route runners.
He is elite. He is elite at what he does. Even if not for fantasy, he's a very good NFL wide receiver. And so with George Pickens, yes, he's hit and miss. And a lot of times, you're betting on those weeks where he has 2 touchdowns and 2 of them are for 30 yards. And then also the weeks where he doesn't do anything and he has 0 targets or 2 targets. Like, I get that. The context is similar to the Drake London situation where, Kenny Pickett was his quarterback last year.
Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky.
The quarterbacks that he's played with, I cannot tell you how bad that they have been. Kenny Pickett was awful. 29th, and we talked about 7 yards per attempt for Desmond Ridder, 6.5 yards per attempt for Kenny Pickett. I am very aware that Matt Canada was also terrible. I get that. Like, he absolutely was. Kenny Pickett, 33rd in accuracy rating, 31st in true completion percentage, 28th in true passer rating, 24th in QBR. Kenny Pickett was the guy that everybody was like, okay, maybe he's going to take a step up next year. This is not a guy that was capable of supporting a wide receiver 1 from fantasy perspective. Not even close. And George Pickens, from a talent perspective, do we think he's like an elite target earner? No, we don't. And we've never thought that. But that being said, when we're talking about drafting him at wide receiver 30, where he finished last year, the wide receiver 30 in fantasy football, in that situation, he's being drafted in the same spot as he finished last year with a significantly better situation. And the reason I use the word significantly better with Russell Wilson at quarterback and I guess potentially Justin Fields is because they're significantly better than Kenny Pickett is. Yeah. And the offense is going to be significantly better than a Matt Canada offense.
Don't underestimate Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator. An offensive coordinator, not a head coach, an OC.
And I think that's what's scaring a lot of people off. Some people may not even know that Arthur Smith is in Pittsburgh, but
that's actually a pro.
It is a pro.
That's a pro for their offensive scheme.
He is worlds better than Matt Canada. And so for George Pickens, like, I'm going to bet that he's still going to hit that floor. 106 targets last year, 30th in PPR points last year among wide receivers. I'm going to bet that he can hit that floor, and I'm probably going to bet that he can finish as like a high-end, probably in the early 20s would be his ceiling this year. And I think I think he's pretty safe because, again, they're going to be throwing the ball more, and they have nobody there. They have nobody. Who is his?
Yeah, and what's the risk? Maybe they just run the frick out of the ball all the time.
Maybe.
And that's absolutely a possibility. It wouldn't surprise me just with the way that Pittsburgh is and has been for a very long time. They want to get back to the Steeler way and all this stuff. But look, you got to take a shot on the guy who's a wide receiver 1 in an offense who has shown in sample sizes that he can be very productive in worse situations. And when you're looking at the guys that are going back to back with them, like T. Higgins is going in that range. I see a reason to take T. Higgins there, but again, you can't.
Here are 6 wide receivers that we really, really like. He is elite. He is elite at what he does. Even if not for fantasy, he's a very good NFL wide receiver. And so with George Pickens, yes, he's hit and miss. And a lot of times, you're betting on those weeks where he has, 2 touchdowns and 2 of them are for 30 yards. And then also the weeks where he doesn't do anything and he has 0 targets or 2 targets. Like, I get that. The context is similar to the Drake London situation where, Kenny Pickett was his quarterback last year.
Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky.
The quarterbacks that he's played with, I cannot tell you how bad that they have been. Kenny Pickett was awful. 29th, and we talked about 7 yards per attempt for Desmond Ridder, 6.5 yards per attempt for Kenny Pickett. I am very aware that Matt Canada was also terrible. I get that. Like, he absolutely was. Kenny Pickett, 33rd in accuracy rating, 31st in true completion percentage, 28th in true passer rating, 24th in QBR. Kenny Pickett was the guy that everybody was like, okay, maybe he's going to take a step up next year. This is not a guy that was capable of supporting a wide receiver 1 from fantasy perspective. Not even close. And George Pickens, from a talent perspective, do we think he's like an elite target earner? No, we don't. And we've never thought that. But that being said, when we're talking about drafting him at wide receiver 30, where he finished last year, the wide receiver 30 in fantasy football, in that situation. He's being drafted in the same spot as he finished last year with a significantly better situation. And the reason I use the word significantly better with Russell Wilson at quarterback and I guess potentially Justin Fields is because they're significantly better than Kenny Pickett is. Yeah. And the offense is going to be significantly better than a Matt Canada offense.
Don't underestimate Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator. An offensive coordinator, not a head coach, an OC.
And I think that's what's scaring a lot of people off. Some people may not even know that Arthur Smith is in Pittsburgh, but
that's actually a pro.
It is a pro.
That's a pro for their offensive scheme.
He is worlds better than Matt Canada. And so for George Pickens, like I'm going to bet that he's still going to hit that floor. 106 targets last year, 30th in PPR points last year among wide receivers. I'm going to bet that he can hit that floor. And I'm probably going to bet that he can finish as like a high end. No, probably in the early 20s would be his ceiling this year. And I think I think he's pretty safe because again, they're going to be throwing the ball more and they have nobody there. They have nobody. Who is his big...
and what's the risk? Maybe they just run the frick out of the ball all the time.
Maybe.
And that's absolutely a possibility. It wouldn't surprise me just with the way that Pittsburgh is and has been for a very long time. They want to get back to the Steeler way and all this stuff. But look, you got to take a shot on the guy who's a wide receiver one in an offense who has shown in sample sizes that he can be very productive in worse situations. And when you're looking at the guys that are going back-to-back with them, like T. Higgins is going in that range. I see a reason to take T. Higgins there, but again, you can't deny that he is a wide receiver too in his own offense. And he has failed to ever be as productive as people have expected him to be over the past multiple years. Josh Jacobs, we are both notably very low on Josh Jacobs and what his outlook is going to be even in fantasy this year. And I think there's a lot of questions there. We like what Marshawn Lloyd could offer in that offense as well as kind of a sleeper pick. Who else is going there? Amari Cooper. Personally, I prefer Amari Cooper. But again, George Pickens, I think, is a great pick there still. Pacheco hasn't even been a running back one.
Right.
He was running back 15 last year. That was his best year ever. And they just brought in more wide receivers. Like, he'll be a really good NFL asset for a team that needs to use him, and he'll continue to be that. And that means less for fantasy than it does for real life. So Take a shot on Pickens when you can. Next guy we're going to have here is, I did just mention Pacheco in the Chiefs offense. Let's talk about Rashee Rice, who's in that same offense. Everyone knows, it's very well documented at this point. Rashee has a fast car. Rashee might get suspended for a few games. But guess what it's going to be? It's going to be a few games. The NFL has shown time and time again that things like this, they don't really care that much about. At least from a suspension perspective. It'll likely be, I'm no lawyer, but I would guess probably no more than 6 games.
I think that's on the high end. I
That's
think
on the
it's
high end.
3 or 4.
No more than 6.
I bet it's 3. I look what Kamara got.
I know.
Like, and not to mention
Kamara beat the crap out of the guy.
I know.
On camera.
I mean, and Rashee Rice, the photographer thing, the charges got dropped in that one, so you're really only looking at the car situation. And yes, Rashee does have a fast car, and yeah, it was a very serious incident, and obviously, not a good one there. But with Rashee Rice,
we're talking about fantasy football,
and if you play fantasy football with your emotions, like, you might not win at fantasy football. And Rashee Rice, like, my emotions tell me right now that I get really happy when I see Rashee Rice as the wide receiver 47 in ADP. Like that, this is a guy that finishes the wide receiver 27 in his rookie year. He's playing in Patrick Mahomes' offense. Yes, you add Hollywood Brown to that offense, and I think that is probably going to have some effect on the type of targets that Rashee Rice is going to get, and Travis Kelce back on the
Xavier
deal.
Worthy is going to help to stretch the field, which is going to open up the short to intermediate game as well, which is where Rashee Rice's bread and butter is.
I feel like his floor is 50, so you're drafting him at his floor essentially. That's why I like him as a pick.
Well, yeah, and guys, this is going to be something that we preach literally all offseason leading up to 2024. I will say it again and again and again, and I will not get tired of it. You play fantasy football for the end of the season, not for the first 4 weeks. This is why Alvin Kamara was such a good value last year. This is why Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs were such good values last year. You've got to play the long game with Rashee Rice, and it's not even that long of a game. It's not that long. He's not going to be out for very long. Don't worry about it. take the shot with the risk at wide receiver 50.
I mean, and you're getting him at such a cheap price that even if he is out, you're going to have drafted enough guys before him that it's not going to kill you to have him out for the first couple weeks. So Jaden Reed's our next guy. He's going as the wide receiver 34 right now in ADP, and he's a guy that finished his rookie year as a wide receiver 25. And basically what this is, we've actually seen him go a lot lower in ESPN leagues and seen Christian Watson jump him.
It's the Christian Watson effect.
And Christian Watson, granted, like nobody's very confident drafting him as well, or Dontavian Wicks, or Romeo Doubs. Nobody wants to guess who the wide receiver 1 is in Green Bay, and we're guessing that it's Jaden Reed. And so for Jordan Love to have success this year, I think that Jaden Reed also has to be productive again. He's talking about a guy that was 16th last year in slot snaps. We like slot snaps. Why? Because we see slot receivers and players in fantasy players in particular playing out of the slot be productive at a higher rate. Talking about a guy that got 14 red zone targets, even though he's not a huge guy, right? But this is a guy that did a lot on really not a ton of opportunity. He was only 49th in the league in target share. He had a 17.5% target share. He only had 94 targets last year. And he had 10 touchdowns, and so that is the one red flag with Jaden Reed is it had so many touchdowns. You have to see him not be touchdown dependent. But that being said, his efficiency was pretty good. He was 27th in yards per route run last year, and so for a guy that really didn't have any expectations as a rookie, we look at that and we say that that's pretty good. And it's basically just how many targets does he get this year? Is it over or is it under 94? And when you're talking about drafting him at wide receiver 34, I think again I think his floor is a little bit lower than wide receiver 34, so this is maybe a little bit more of a risky one. I do think he has a floor in the 40s because if Christian Watson and then one of Wicks or Doubs balls out this year, maybe Jaden Reed isn't as productive. But naturally, you expect a guy who came out as a rookie and played like that to take a little bit of a step up and progress in his career and progress in his skill set. You also expect that offense to be pretty good again this year and for Jordan Love to have another year under his belt. And I like Jaden Reed's consistency more than I've seen out of Christian Watson, to be honest with you, from a fantasy perspective at least. And so with that, I'll bet on Jaden Reed being the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. And I like his price right now, so I'll take him at wide receiver 34 in fantasy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when you're looking at his production over the latter half of the season, we got an interesting note from one of our supporters over at flockfantasy.com. He was telling us about Jaden Reed's production from like weeks 10 on-ish compared to Puka Nakua's, who Puka Nakua, everyone knows, going first round consensus pretty much in fantasy right now. And it is not that far off. In fact, it's pretty dang similar. They are neck and neck. Jaden Reed averaging 17 points per game from weeks 11 to 18. Puka Nakua averaging 17.4 points per game over that range. There. And again, that's a smaller sample size in an entire season. But when you're looking at the price and where Jaden Reed is going right now, you look at that potential upside. We see how high Puka Nakua has been boosted up boards, and that should be happening. Why is it not happening with Jaden Reed after the finish that he had last season?
He finished the year great. You can't really deny it.
Yeah, and it wasn't touchdown dependent. He only had one more touchdown than Puka in that range.
Yep.
So it was really, really good, really nice to see for an improvement from a rookie.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to be a rookie anymore, and he's tied to Jordan Love. Yeah. So last guy we're going to have here is Deontay Johnson. We already mentioned him, alluded to him a little bit when we were talking about George Pickens, but Deontay Johnson is, it's as simple as this. Adam Thielen, for like 2/3 of the season, was a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. As a 33-year-old, washed-up wide receiver who's a shell of what he used to be and can barely run, and somehow he's still playing. And Deontay Johnson is worlds better going into the same situation, but better because there's an actual head coach, not named Frank Reich, who works wonders with quarterbacks and has historically with Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. That's Dave Canales is the head coach for Carolina now. So you're looking at improved volume, improved opportunity, improved scheme, and an improved wide receiver core. And a big part of that is Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is the weapon to help Bryce Young develop, and he will get the volume that he needs to be productive there. Count on wide receiver 2 production. Count on it.
Bold.
How's it bold? How's it bold after we saw what Adam Thielen did last year? He's an inferior wide receiver.
He is. That's true. We haven't seen Deontay Johnson since 2021 put up a season where he was.
Have we seen Deontay Johnson with an actual quarterback?
No, and that's part of it. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's bold.
So tell me about the targets that he's had the last couple of years with that quarterback play.
In 13 games last year, he had 87 targets. The year before, 147 targets. So that was the year he scored 100. He had 147 targets, only caught 86 of them, and had 0 touchdowns. Yeah. So like he had the targets and nothing else. The year before that, obviously, was his wide receiver 8 year, 169 target, 170 targets. But that was Ben's last year, right? 2021.
Yes,
that
2021 was his last year.
Yes.
Yep.
And so
Which
again,
he wasn't much better than Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett,
first year.
No, but he could at least
he
was better. He was better. He was still better.
Well,
Kenny Pickett was bad.
Pickett's rookie season wasn't horrible. He was better his rookie season.
It was bad for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, you're right.
But well, Ben couldn't move his last year. But the point is, Deontay Johnson, he draws targets at an elite rate, and when you have a guy like that, and if I don't think it's a bad take, I just think it's bold, but I wouldn't be surprised at all.
They had the worst offense last year in Carolina. One of the worst offenses last year, and Thielen brought in 137 targets.
There you go. So
and brought in 103 of them, which shows you what type of receiver he was playing, which is a short to intermediate receiver. That is what Deontay Johnson does. That's what he does. Like he's going to be the slot wide receiver.
Yeah. All right, let us know what you think in the comments. Do us a huge favor. If you play fantasy, drop a like on this video and make sure you subscribe. Those two things really help us grow our channel and support Nathan and I as we try to grow this thing to be bigger. And it also really directly supports how we're able to do research and things like that. So like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching today, guys. We'll see you later.
Me and Danny are going through some of the hardest clicks to make on Underdog Fantasy right now. If you guys are getting prepped for your home league drafts, this should give you guys a good insight to the current, ADP landscape and some of the guys that we're not really selecting in drafts right now. A lot of these guys are not necessarily guys that we hate. We just don't really like the price at this point. So we'll kind of break down 5 guys each and go through why we're fading them currently in the drafts that we're doing. Of course, take this advice into Underdog Fantasy drafts, get into some Best Ball Mania 5 drafts right now, 1.5 million to first, 15 million in total prizes, and make sure to use the promo code FSE when you sign up and do some of these drafts. So, Danny, without further ado, let's hit the intro. All right, so let's get this thing going here. We're going to start with a guy that everybody feels like they're fading. Everybody feels like they hate. Kyren Williams, running back of the Los Angeles Rams. Right now, going off the board is like an early third rounder. At points, he was kind of in the mid-second round, even a little bit earlier in the offseason. I have him ranked kind of towards the end of the third round, in the mid-third round area. Like I said, he's everybody's favorite fade right now. I don't really want to discount a running back who had like literally a legendary season or a very good season last year. 21 points per game, RB2 in points per game. He averaged over 5 yards per carry, so it wasn't just volume that he got there on. However, I mean, he's already banged up. He's a sub 200-pound running back, and we've really never seen those guys repeat as multi-time RB1s. Usually they have blip on the radar type of seasons, and then they don't usually come back and have these monster volume seasons yet again. If they get there again, it's more of the Devon Achane efficiency kind of running backs. The team also drafts Blake Corum, a guy that has kind of that Devin Singletary quality of coaching staffs just love him. They love that he does his job and he kind of doesn't do anything flashy. He kind of just gets the job done. So when I look at Kyren Williams, his league-leading 83.9% snap share, kind of expected to regress a little bit. I still don't mind him. I think he's still a fine click in the mid-third round.